you everyone for joining. I know that it might be a bit early for you or a bit late for you, depending on which part of the world you're joining from, and very really appreciate you guys joining. Sarah, as you all would know, is a UX recruiter, and she has been in hiring for and recruiting for almost a decade now. So she has tons of experience, and she has helped countless designers to navigate the hiring process. And very much appreciate her time to join this session and share her insights with us all.
Yeah, thank you. Super excited to be here. Appreciate everyone joining this morning and hope we can get through some fun conversation here.
Cool. Awesome. So I guess I just wanted to kick the session off with a question that has been on many designers' minds, including me, which is sort of, when we are looking for jobs, when you're applying for different jobs, we apply for the position, and then it's a black box. We don't know
Yeah.
what's going on. We mysteriously get an email or a call from a recruiter. So could you share a little bit about the POV of like what's going on behind the scenes when someone applies for a role at the company?
Yeah, definitely. And it is, I mean, it is mysterious. And I think that it can honestly vary company to company, just depending on how mature that company is. Like typically the more mature company, they have like more in-depth ATS technology that they utilize. So ATS is applicant tracking system. Most companies who are hiring, when you apply to a position, your resume goes directly into that applicant tracking system. And that's where your profile kind of lives. And that's where, like for me as a recruiter, that's where a lot of my day-to-day work is. It's how we have your contact information, how we go through your profile, how we action steps in the interview process. So it's very, very important when you do apply that you think about like having all that information, your contact information correct, your phone number correct, all of those details there. But typically, your profile will go into that pool, that ATS, and then as a recruiter, I will then go through and start reviewing those applications. Now, I know there's some ATSs out there that will actually parse resumes based on keywords. And so there's certain automation and AI that specific ATS systems will have that will actually weed out certain profiles initially before it even gets to the recruiter. For most kind of mid-sized companies, we do not do that. We do not have any type of automatic rejection. If you don't have a keyword on your resume, your profile does get reviewed by a recruiter. So typically, we'll go through, we'll review applications, shortlist a certain amount of applications for the manager to review, and then that manager will actually take a look directly, review those profiles, and then we kind of go through from there with the full process. So typically, once the manager has reviewed and says, yes, we'd like to move forward, that's when you'll hear from the recruiter to actually kind of kick off the process and start that recruiter interview. And then they'll typically work with you throughout the entire process from there.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm curious, like, could you share a little bit more about the ATS system?
Yeah.
Because I imagine there are a lot of people that are applying for these positions. So how are those prioritized, those applications? Is it automatic? Is it
Yeah.
something done manually?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, ATS systems, I think, are going to continue to be a central hub for a lot of different companies, especially within the tech world. And it's going to be even more and more important as you think about when you apply to a when you submit your resume to have certain kind of keywords or certain qualifications, like those pieces highlighted in there, because even if the ATS doesn't automatically reject, as a recruiter, I have the ability to actually go through and source candidates and like search specific keywords and to actually pull out, especially when we think about some of those high volume recs, like we'll have positions on our end where within 24 hours, we have thousands of applications for one open position. And so in order for us to kind of go through to try to quickly get a set of candidates that meet those qualifications, we do keyword search matching. We look for essential qualifications there. We'll kind of go through to actually try to parse down those top qualified candidates for that specific role. And so it is important when you think about your resume to look at the job description, try to apply specific words if they're looking for AI, make sure you're highlighting AI specific projects and skills within your resume. Um, I think there's certain ways to do it and certain ways not to. I've seen candidates that will actually copy job description details and then just paste it in like a header or footer in their resume and turn those details white so that you can't see them, in there, but then it's pulling out all the keywords. What they don't realize is that when the ATS, when you're sourcing via those, it will actually highlight that. So as a recruiter, I see, oh, a bunch of highlighted yellow in your footer and header, but no words. And then you realize that it's just the job description copied in there, trying to kind of bypass that initial review. And so you might think that that's getting you actually into a place where you're being reviewed, but it's actually probably taking it away once they realize where it's at. So I would just take the time to, personalize your resume, go through, make sure you can actually speak to those skills for what you're actually submitting in there. And then you can also utilize a cover letter too. If you don't have specific projects, or maybe you do have some gaps that they're looking for on the resume, or excuse me, on the job description, you can use that cover letter to actually kind of add to or highlight some of the other transferable skills that you might have, with a different, I know, Reshma, you mentioned marketing background, like what other transferable skills that you can utilize that could be beneficial for the role that you're applying for.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I actually did not imagine that ATS plays such a big role. It was always like something at the back of my mind, at least.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's with everyone else, but yeah, I did not think that it would be such a critical part to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
That-
definitely is. And it's again, like maybe for more startups or smaller companies, if they have more informal processes, it probably doesn't play as big of a role. But mid-size, more mature companies, it absolutely is a key focus area and something that the recruiters and HR teams truly do work day to day in.
Got it. Um, that makes sense. I wonder if you could touch a little bit upon the cover letter portion. Uh,
Yeah.
like there are differing opinions that I've heard
Oh,
on
yes.
this. So yes, if you could share a bit more how that's evaluated, where does it sort of.
We actually have conversations and about this internally with our recruiting team on a consistent basis because I do think you'll hear different perspectives from different individuals. And so I think I always go back to a cover letter can be optional, but it can also be very powerful if it's adding to your resume. If you are just copying the same skills that you have on your resume into your cover letter and then submitting that, it's not really adding to your profile and to your application. But if you can use that cover letter to actually, personalize a message, like demonstrate that you've actually, done some research on the company you're applying for, highlighting why you feel like you're aligned to that company's mission or that company's, stage of where they're at in growth, showcase your enthusiasm within that, like why you feel like your skills and experience and maybe some of those non-traditional skills transfer into the role that you're actually applying for. And then I think it helps just kind of connect the dots on some of the previous roles, maybe projects, volunteer opportunities, networks you're involved in, connect the dots to that open role. So it can really help add to your profile. It can also take away from your profile as well if you're not spending the time. If you're going to submit a cover letter, I would recommend spending the time to personalize it. Um, I've had candidates or cover letters be submitted where it's actually for the wrong company or for a completely different role than they're applying for, which mistakes happen. So that's okay. But just if you're going to take the time to actually submit a cover letter with your application, take the time to personalize it for that company and for that specific role.
Got it. That makes sense, and it also looks like recruiters do look at the cover letter.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
so,
I hope most I do. I very much do. I know my hiring managers do as well. We take it you take the time to submit it. We want to take the time to be able to review and be respectful with that. Um, I definitely think maybe depending on industry or type of role you're applying for, some may or may not, but I know for UX, we absolutely do in the hiring and the managers 100% do as well.
okay, that's great. That's good to know.
Yeah.
That's yeah, that's awesome. I'm also thinking about like the resume portion of
Yeah.
this whole equation. Um, what do you think are like the key elements that uh, sort of recruiters look for in a resume? What makes it stand out in the job market?
Yeah. I think immediately I go to, clear, concise formatting. Like, is your resume clean and easy to read? Does it have a professional layout? Is it consistent? Are you using different fonts, different sizes, different colors or bolding? We notice those pieces. And so clear, concise formatting, making sure it's consistent throughout the entire resume are definitely key. Easy to scan. We want to be able to go through and quickly see what skills, what impact that you have. So I very much recommend bullet points, short, kind of sweet, to the point, what results, what impact did you have in each one of those roles. um, Actually highlighting and having like tailored and targeted content is going to be key as well. So using keywords from the job description that actually enhance your resume, as long as you can actually speak to those, skills and experience in there. It's always great. I'll see folks who will have like a skills section at the top and then kind of list out their projects or experience beyond that, which is great. I always think that the skill section is wonderful, but it's definitely more powerful when you can see the skills and how you actually use those in the specific projects that you had or the specific roles that you had as well. So making sure that you're not just listing out the skills or technologies that you worked within, but then actually being able to demonstrate those in the job sections on how you use those and what ways you went about that and the experience directly with those. So those will be very key pieces. I also think actually highlighting like your impact and results. So not just listing out the responsibilities that you had in those positions, but highlighting the data that in the impact, if you did increase growth or ARR, what was that? If you increase customer engagement and adoption, what was that percentage? Some of this is under like you can't share specifics, but you can highlight, XX percent, like showing data, showing metrics. Those are going to be key things that as a recruiter and as hiring managers, they really want to see within your resume overall. The other piece I'll kind of highlight too is soft skills, highlighting like communication, teamwork, problem solving. You don't have to list out every single team or individual that you collaborated with at a previous company, but highlight those soft skills as well. And then in the interviews you can utilize that time to kind of expand upon those too. The other kind of final piece I'll say, and then I'll take a pause, is like action oriented statements and verbs as well. Like the language in there matters of how you're like, I implemented this, I managed this, we developed this, my impact was here, versus kind of long drawn out sentences, like making them short and sweet bullet points, very easy to kind of go through. Those are big pieces as well.
Yeah, I think so. Highlighting impact, keeping it short and sweet, and then speaking using action words
Yeah.
are like the key. You,
Yeah, like,
you
not just listing out past jobs, but, like, creating this compelling narrative that's really clear for the recruiter and manager to see, like, the value you brought to that company, your accomplishments, excuse me, and how those are aligned and transferable to the role that you're actually applying to.
mm, mm. Makes sense. Is there like a sweet sort of spot for how long the resume needs to be,
Ah,
like, or is it
these are
just
all really great questions, and there's no right or wrong in this either. Um, I think some folks will try to push everything in one page. I don't think we're necessarily in that stage. Everything's done digitally now, so we're not printing out, pages. Most, as I say that, and I have a ton of papers right next to me. Most of it's done online, so it's easy to scroll through. Um, I would typically say like a page per 10 years of experience that you have. If you have specific projects or highlights, like you can even put like previous experience available upon request. You can link, to your LinkedIn profile that has your full history. You can go through, link your portfolio that has more projects, but keep it keep it within a few pages at most. I would say anything beyond 3, you're probably going to lose the person who's reviewing it. But as long as it's applicable and as long as the skills that you're highlighting in there really can be transferable, or you want to highlight those for a reason per the job that you're actually applying to. But I don't think you necessarily need to stick to one page. I know a lot of folks in the past like, okay, one, can't go beyond that. If you have 2, if you have 3, that's still okay. Just make sure it's relevant experience and make sure there's a reason why you're actually submitting it on for that specific role.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think highlighting the impact also makes sense, like putting in metrics and numbers.
Mhm.
Um, and but I'm thinking about like a different pool of candidates who are just starting out in the UX design
Yeah.
and might not have a formal experience in this field. Maybe they have some hobby projects, maybe
Mhm.
some part-time roles, some internships. um, what are your suggestions for those candidates? And not having a formal experience, does it affect their chances of getting hired?
I think it would depend on the role that they're applying to. Lacking formal UX experience can be a disadvantage for some of those roles that are out there, but it doesn't necessarily disqualify you from being considered for, as a candidate. Highlighting a strong portfolio, highlighting your specific projects, it demonstrates your personal projects, your internships, that you have a passion for UX, that you're willing and wanting to learn, highlighting what certifications or what courses you've done specifically related to that. Those kind of show and demonstrate that you have that growth mindset, that you want to come in, you want to learn, and finding the right company that's open to maybe a more junior individual in that skill set, where they can bring you in and then train and kind of grow from there. So it doesn't disqualify you, but again, I think it's going to depend on the type of role and the company that you're applying to. So entry level roles, those are typically uh, more open to candidates with experience, with limited experience, where they can, train and mentor and grow you in role directly. I think again, the portfolio in that case will be crucial. Like, can you showcase what personal projects you've worked on that demonstrate, if it's related to the industry or to the, company that you're applying to, if it shows complexity in the work, so you can kind of work through, if it's showing, very clear case studies that highlight design process, problem solving skills, they could look at that work and, bypass the limited experience if you have the skills that you can showcase in that portfolio. I think this is also where like networking and is going to be like a key piece, like being involved in specific communities, attending sessions like these, getting connected on LinkedIn, different memberships and different kind of groups there in the UX community. You can meet a lot of, hiring managers that way, recruiters that way, and kind of get some inside, specifics on different areas and different companies. But it's showing that you're interested, you're wanting to learn, you're wanting to stay connected and grow within the UX community as well.
Got it. That makes sense. So, like networking and reaching out to hiring managers and recruiters, even outside of like the job
Yeah.
application portal, can open up a lot of doors for
Mhm.
that were previously not open.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Well, and I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but I think, one of the ways that recruiters get applications is through referrals. And a lot of those referrals will get kind of pushed up to the top if they're referred obviously from somebody within the company. And so networking on LinkedIn, having those connections, if you can find a connection through school alumni, through a specific, again, like community that you're involved in, and having that individual actually refer you into those positions, that's a really great way to ensure that your resume is getting in front of the hiring manager and the recruiter right away.
got it. So, r- r- trying to get a referral becomes like an important aspect in this, I imagine.
Yeah, it does. And it doesn't, if you're not referred in, that doesn't, again, eliminate you from, but having the connection, being able to um, have a current employee or past employee refer you to the role, it definitely typically does receive priority.
Got it. That makes sense. And it also sort of raises this question of like uh, networking and ability
Mhm.
to use LinkedIn to
Yep.
leverage these networks. I'm curious what role from a job application and hiring standpoint, like what role does LinkedIn play in terms of uh, sort of evaluating a candidate,
Yeah.
and like does it sort of complement, does it have to complement the resume? Do recruiters look at it? Yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely look at it. I mean, your resume is the number one. Like that is your application that you're applying to. That's the first thing that we do look at. But definitely from there, going into LinkedIn to see and kind of compare. Do you have more experience or skills listed? Are you involved in the community there? Do you have additional kind of even um, references or recommendations on LinkedIn can go a long way too. So being active on your LinkedIn, um, keeping that up to date, keeping that aligned to your years, like, matching your resume and the company names and the years that you were there, those things do add to it. But your resume is definitely the number one priority when we think about reviewing and getting you in the interview process. And I think your LinkedIn can kind of confirm those skills and experience as well. So it can definitely add to it. But I think for recruiting, like we source from LinkedIn, most companies, like that's the number one sourcing platform that when we're out there outreaching and looking at different candidates. So having an active LinkedIn presence, having an active LinkedIn profile that highlights your skills is a huge positive as well.
So keeping your LinkedIn profile up to date becomes critical. uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm also wondering, do you have any suggestions for how or what's an ideal way to reach out to a recruiter on LinkedIn? Is there a suggested process, a way?
Yeah, you absolutely can. Transparently, I will say I get dozens and dozens of outreaches every single week, and it's tough to kind of keep up. I know we try to, but sometimes it can get lost in that mix of chaos of just so many messages coming in. So absolutely can reach out and you can say, I see that you're working at this company. If you have a connection, like went to the same school, if you have a connection with that recruiter, anything to highlight that of to why you're reaching out and hoping that they can take some time to chat with you. I think you will honestly have a better chance of trying to find someone within that company that you have a connection to who might again be able to refer you into that role. So finding network, school alumni connections, community connections, LinkedIn member, any of those connections and reaching out. But it definitely does not hurt to reach out to a recruiter. And if they have the bandwidth and time, I know I try to, but again, it's just sometimes the high volume there. So being creative and kind of exploring the connections that you do have on LinkedIn with the different communities, and trying to find, employees who are active at the company you're interested in.
Got it. Yeah, I think that helps a lot. Um, and I'm also curious about like all of the non-work related uh, sort of links that designers often post on, platforms that
Yeah.
designers post on. So Dribble, Behance, like do these links, platforms highlighting that in resume, does that add any value? Like do recruiters have time to like go through their Dribble profile or Behance?
Yes, it definitely adds value. I know most UX recruiters that at least I work with will check those out. We're probably not going through every single project that you have on there, but I think it shows again, it shows your interest in wanting to, your passion for UX and for design. It can highlight certain, you know, um, skills that might not be on your resume that's text based, obviously. So it's an easy way for us to be able to click that link and see some of your work, whether it's personal or professional work there too. So it demonstrates that passion and just activity that you have in that, on those platforms, being engaged in the community. So that really does demonstrate kind of a passion for your craft. And I know as well, hiring managers will absolutely go through those in more detail as well. So it gives more visibility into the hiring manager once you're in that stage of some of maybe those other side or personal projects that you're working on as well. And it can be that expansion to your portfolio. So maybe you highlight a few specific case studies on your portfolio, but then you have some side fun projects that you want to highlight too, and maybe different animation or 3D modeling. Like it's just a way to enhance and show some of the other creativity as well. So the easy access is great. I definitely think like the placement of the, going back to like resume format, if you're going to put those links on there, making sure it's clear, concise, like labeling those versus just putting the full URL on there, like just keeping it clear and very easy to kind of click through.
Got it. And that's a great segue to like some of the questions that I have received around portfolios,
Yeah.
um, and what roles they play during the evaluation process. So could you share a little bit more about what do recruiters look for in a portfolio? How much time do they spend in evaluating one? Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
what?
that's a great question. I
Mhm.
always start with, I am not a designer. Like I am not a trained UX designer. I don't have that direct background and experience. I am not the expert in this. My primary focus is looking at your resume and looking to see, do you have industry related experience? Do you have the right, keywords, all of those pieces, qualifications for what we're looking for. But we do look at the portfolio. I've sat with managers and had them walk me through, how are you reviewing this? What are you focusing on? So I think I have a good idea of what that is, but I'm more so focusing on your resume and then getting that passed into the manager, who will then take a lot more time in your portfolio and going through those. But in the portfolio, like I know just in general, like they're looking for process, not just, the final product for what you actually built out or designed. They're looking to see, can you start and create a case study and store like strong storytelling, very compelling, starting from the beginning, walking through the steps in the process that you had to ultimately what that final result was. And so well-written case studies that tell that clear, compelling story are essential, and putting your actual process in there is also going to be essential.
That makes sense. And like in these case studies, like what kind of weightage is given to like personal projects versus like projects that have like uh, real world experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, I think it will depend on the actual company and position you're applying to. I think on personal projects, though, they can still hold the same weight, even if it's not something that is necessarily relatable to the industry or the company that you're applying to. If it can still show very clear process, if it can show complexity, if it can show problem solving, like even if it's in a different space, it can still demonstrate your thought process in UX, and can still be as powerful in those. And so if you have, one professional and a few personal, I would add those personal projects, making sure it kind of shows the variety there, because they will take the time to go through both. And again, it depends on the role you're applying to and really what they're looking for overall. But the managers will take time to kind of review those both. And I would recommend the same thing on personal, like make sure you're demonstrating the process, showing the complexity of what you work through on that personal level and what impact it actually made.
And that sort of brings another question is how many projects should a designer highlight in a portfolio? What is the number?
Yeah, yeah. There's no magic number on that. I mean, level and experience definitely plays a role in what a manager would be expecting in those. Typically for more, entry level or mid-level, they're looking for, probably 3 to 5 case studies and projects that they can go through. For higher level, more senior level, they're going to be looking for a bit more. But I think 3 to 5 is a good sweet spot for entry or mid-level. And it can be a combination again of internship work, of personal projects, of professional projects that kind of go through, but just make sure what you're actually putting on there. Like I would default to that quality over quantity. If you have a couple of case studies that are really strong, that demonstrate the process, that showcase your skills, that's going to have more of an impact than having 10 case studies that are really light in the specifics and details. And so thinking about that, definitely going for quantity over quality.
So I just have a couple more questions,
I'm
and
sorry,
then
I think I switched that. Quality over quantity.
quality over quantity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully you got
So
that. It's still early for me on this side. I need another cup of coffee, so sorry.
no, I think we all understood that.
Yeah. Okay, great, great.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. And so one last question that I've received in like the portfolios arena is that
Okay.
what is your recommendation on an online portfolio versus like a PDF or a slide deck? Does that work? What format is usually preferred for this?
Um, the most common that we see are portfolios or online portfolios. I also understand that, and we'll even have candidates say, I can't showcase some of this work because it's under an NDA. So it would be something, live that they would have to share in an interview, per their previous employer's, expectations. And so in those cases, if you highlight or attach a PDF that gives an example of the work that they can walk through, The interactiveness, though, on a portfolio is typically something the managers put a lot of weight in to be able to kind of scroll through to interact with any of the work that you have on there. So I would definitely highlight, if possible, an online portfolio as being kind of the preferred. But again, you can highlight and say in the application if you have other projects that you can share during a live interview, but you can't publish publicly. That's okay as well. And showcase maybe one or two of those other case studies in a PDF form if needed.
And so, one last question, and then we will open it up to all of you to ask questions. Um, so, I think this question talks about like the screening interview process, where like a candidate is already sort of through the funnel and they're talking on a call. Is there anything specific that users are looking, that recruiters are using, looking to evaluate during the screening interview? Uh, are there any
Yeah,
red flags that they're looking for?
Yeah, great question. Typically in the screener, it's really wanting to hear a bit more about your, overall background, wanting to hear some specifics maybe about a recent project, that you delivered on and kind of hearing the process there. We're looking for, clear, concise communication. We're looking to see if you can highlight, data, metrics, if you can speak to what's on your resume and portfolio. We also want to hear like enthusiasm, excitement. Like, do you know anything about the company you're applying to? Are you familiar with where they're at in, the market? So showing some curiosity that you've done some research, like definitely not expecting you to be an expert in that company or our product by any means, but just showing some curiosity that you kind of went through and did some research before that call definitely goes a long way. But it really is just kind of a deeper dive into your experience, making sure that it does align to the qualifications for what the manager is looking for, being able to address any questions that the candidate has. So having questions is always highly recommended and encouraged. Like we want to hear, like, do you care about, the process? Are you interested in hearing about the culture, the environment? So coming with some questions for the recruiter is a huge positive. But really, it is just that deeper dive. We'll answer questions you have. We'll share more about the role too. And then the next stage is typically a one-on-one with the hiring manager, which at that point we would have you sign like an NDA. So that conversation is going to be much more in depth on, what success metrics look like in the role, what the full expectations are, like what you'd actually be stepping into if you did move forward with that position.
Cool. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that so basically, like, do your research about the company and have good questions to ask the
Mhm.
recruiter.
Yeah, and we'll go through like logistics, excuse me, too, as well as like,
Mm.
location, if the role requires a certain location or if remote, compensation, start time, like some of those other pieces as well. Do your research on that aspect, on market compensation, on ranges within the industry for the level for the roles that you're applying to, because you'll likely be asked, like, do you have a target compensation range? You can also ask that question: what is your target range? What is your company compensation plan? But definitely have some research on that, come with some ideas so you kind of know if you are asked that question, what range is market competitive and what you should be targeting.
Awesome. So I think we already have received some questions in the chat, uh, and I think we might have answered a few, but I guess we can probably just go over that. And then if there are any questions, feel free to also unmute yourself
Yeah.
and ask the question directly without putting it into the chat. Um, cool. So I think Anuj is asking about the impact metrics. Do you have any suggestions for junior designers who might not have access to these numbers? And then Sahil has a similar question, which is, what if the product feature that I worked on didn't take off or get shipped? What metrics should I mention for these
Yeah,
cases?
I think you can highlight that as well, but just highlight like the work that you actually had done in that role, even if it didn't get shipped, like what you were trying to strive for, maybe why it didn't actually go live. I mean, there's other pieces that you can do, like how much, if you talk to customers, how many hours of customer conversations did you have? How much research did you conduct? Like some of those other pieces as well that you can highlight some of the specifics versus just listing like the actual just day-to-day responsibilities and work, like highlighting some of those pieces of maybe what impact that you did have, even if it was limited or even if it didn't end up ultimately getting launched or shipped.
Got it. So, like highlighting your work and trying to figure out ways to highlight different kind of impact. Maybe it helped to align and sort of support the vision for the company's product.
Mhm.
So, figuring out ways to highlight like non-tangible impacts
Yeah.
will also help.
Yeah, or even the complexity that you were working within too. If you're working within a company, maybe that was, I mean, we're kind of like bought out by a private equity, and there's a lot of shifts and changes. Like, what complexity internally maybe were you even working within that doesn't necessarily have to be related to your design, but just shows that you have the ability to kind of problem solve in a complex, ambiguous or environment overall.
I think we also have a few questions around um, the position. Like, does degree matter in like applying for a UX role?
Yeah, it depends on the company. Um, it's not a requirement. It's not a hard requirement. You can have specific courses, you can do other trainings that you can highlight or certifications that you can get. And so a degree is not necessarily required for the role, but they do want to see have you gotten certain UX certifications, and if you do, kind of highlight those. If you don't have a degree to highlight, some companies might have that requirement, but for at least us and a lot of other mid-size within this tech, B2B SaaS world, they don't require a degree at this point.
Okay. So even having a certification or some kind of UX courses online
Mhm.
would also be helpful.
Yep.
Okay, that uh, that helps a lot. So I guess I just wanted to like now switch over to like the participants that we have in the session, like outside of chat. Like if there are any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question to Sarah.
Yeah, I think Kunal has already covered the question I asked as a fresher. If what are the recruiters are gonna expect, and I think you already answered that, so I'm clear about it now. Thank you.
Can I ask something?
Go for it, Sarah.
Hi. So okay, I'm trying to go back. You're talking about LinkedIn and
Yeah.
um, reaching out to people and networking and things like that, and having your profile up to date. But what I keep being told also is to be, posting and interacting in groups and sharing. And I don't know how is that really helpful. And not that I want to not talk to people, but I mean, I feel like as a recruiter, a hiring manager, you're not seeing that when you look. So I'm just curious, how much effort should it be putting into that?
Yeah, I think
In that,
if Yeah, and I agree with you. Honestly, I we don't see that. I if I'm going through
yeah,
and like deep diving into your LinkedIn, I can see some of that activity, but that's
sure.
not my go-to first. My go-to
Okay,
would be your resume, and then if you have an up-to-date LinkedIn. I
okay.
also understand like life is busy. Like, you have other
Right,
things going on, and so being able to comment or go on all these,
right.
messaging and LinkedIn, it's hard to do and it's hard to keep up. And so I would put more focus in on the resume and even just your LinkedIn page, like keeping it aligned to your resume and profile, making sure it's up to date on the experience, but
Okay,
less focused on like what type of activity are you having. I think
okay.
more of the activity is for more positives there, like networking within the community and getting
Mhm.
additional context, maybe within the company or industry that you're trying to break into. But it wouldn't be a hard requirement for a position
Okay,
that you'd be applying to.
good. That's great news.
Yeah, yeah, no, great question too.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
I got a question.
Yeah.
So, how about it is when you recognize that the candidate used AI for the resume? Because it feels like unfair where you guys use AI, and you can automate to research and filter down, but we cannot, and
Oh,
we're being blamed for it.
yeah. Well, in what way have you seen on like I'm a absolute I mean, we utilize AI. I utilize AI every day within tools
Right.
on how we're actually working through.
But if I use it for creating my personalized resume or my cover letter, then maybe the AI that you use damages because it recognizes that it's AI generated, so it puts in in the bottom of the list, maybe?
I mean, for Smartsheet, we don't have a tool that would put that down in that we would like look to see, hey, is this AI generated? I absolutely am a fan of utilizing all of the tools that we can to make this easier, as long as you can speak to the specifics or what you. So I always say like using AI as a start, but then being able to kind of personalize it and make sure it really is catered to your experience so you can speak to it there. But I mean, I think utilizing AI to draft resumes, to draft cover letters, to provide some guidance and recommendations are a big positive, as long as there are some reviews and personalization there, and then being able to speak to what that does look like.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
My other question is that after you go through an interview, the sad part is that you don't get feedback.
Mm.
You don't really get what went wrong or what was that thing so you can improve. In the field, it's about feedback, personal growth, but you don't get through this experience. It's very frustrating.
Yeah.
Any advice there?
It is hard, and I wish I had a better answer, but a lot of it does come from legalities, and it's coming directly from legal departments within companies of not wanting to be full transparency, like liable for certain lawsuits or things like that. So it's just put restrictions more so on. I always recommend for folks, like ask that recruiter that you are working with, hey, can you hop on a quick call? Can we chat live? They might be more willing to have like a direct live conversation via phone versus maybe putting something in writing or an email. If we want to help with all of this, sometimes our hands are tied with that. And I know it's not fun to hear that on your end. I know interviewing can be tough and wanting feedback, but it's just the reality of where we're at. And so trying to find more of those, creative ways, asking the hiring manager directly in the call if they have any direct feedback, live in the recruiter screen as well at the end, asking them if they have any direct feedback, or after the fact, seeing if they would spend just a couple minutes via phone and kind of chatting through those pieces.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you,
Sarah.
Yeah. I think that also reminds me of a question that I received quite a bit, which was, are there any red flags that you've commonly observed within the candidates that you have spoken to or interviewed? Some common mistakes that they should avoid during the interview process.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think interviewing is a skill, and I think interviewing can be very tough. And so I think practicing your interview responses, and this is something to Oscar's point on AI, utilizing AI, like prepping and kind of going through practice questions on potential questions that you might be asked and being able to respond to those in a crisp, clear manner, strong communication. If someone asks, typically I'll start with, give me a quick overview of your background, like a 2 to 3 minute kind of review. And if you can't review that in 3 minutes, if it takes 10, 15, the communication skills, those pieces, really aren't going to align. And so having that practice, being able to speak to metrics, data, it's going to be key. So practicing interviews, questions, whether it's in front of the mirror or utilizing AI, like I will ask a question and say, this is my response. How is that response? And actually getting some guidance and some feedback there as well to be able to cater.
Yeah, that's actually a great suggestion. And just to add to that, I think one of the things that I've noticed is the application, like the app interface for Chat GPT. It has a voice interface to it as well. So sometimes I would like just converse with the AI to like kind of act as a sounding board. So maybe this is something that we can leverage in terms of for the interviews. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Sarah, I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
What I want to understand is that if I were to vet my CV or resume through a ATS system, do you have any suggestions when it comes to like testing how much of your resume is readable by the AI? Or like, for example, I had um, a resume that contained multiple colors, had some, different contrasts, and someone told me that this is not ATS friendly. you need to go back and go into complete black and white to have the best contrast, or at least use certain type of grays that would work on ATS. So do you think there are a few tools that a person could check, like, so for our grammar, there's Grammarly. So there, is there any other tool that we could use to
It's a
improve
great
our?
question. I'm not aware of anything that you can use to kind of like check to see how it is compatible. However, we've seen that even on our end on resumes that have come in with specific colors or those pieces that just don't get submitted in and show up on our end probably the way that you intended it to. So I always recommend like simple on the resume, clear formatting, like black and white, font, and PDF format. If you can submit PDF, that's going to be the most transferable and the best way to submit within an ATS at this point here. And then being able to utilize like your portfolio link and the portfolio to highlight some of those other creative pieces. But even sometimes like pictures on resumes or graphics also will have issues. And unfortunately, it's just the limited technology right now. So I would actually recommend, being more simple on that and then using the links, to your portfolio to highlight some of those other creative aspects. But I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with a tool at this point that can actually kind of confirm upfront for you of how it is showing up within an ATS.
Oh,
I will have profiles though, or candidates who do submit where the resume isn't formatted accurately, and I will send a direct email to say, hey, your resume did not come through. Can you email it to me? So if you do feel that way when you apply, you can find like a careers at email alias or HR at alias that you can actually email to, typically on the company's website, to say, I applied to this role. I think my application, potential resume didn't go through. Here it is attached. Can you please ensure that it is added to my profile accurately as well?
okay. Thanks.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
definitely.
Cool. I think Ritvika had a very interesting question in the chat, which is what kind of skills and qualities the recruiters look for in case of designers with 3 to 4 years of experience, and what are the KPIs?
Yeah, great question. Um, we look for the process that you're following. We look for the complexity that you've worked within. And again, that can be complexity in design. It can be the complexity that you're actually, company wise, internal complexity, like wanting to demonstrate like what process, how you problem solve, how you utilize data to inform your decision making. So those pieces will all be key. Specific tools or technologies is just going to be so industry specific. And so I don't mean to be general here, but going back to the job description that you're actually applying to and kind of going through their must-haves or their nice-to-haves even. And, do you have the skills that they're looking for? And then how can you actually align those skills within your resume to highlight the experience that it relates to? And again, highlighting in the skills section in a resume is always great, but highlighting how you use those tools and technologies in your project specifically is going to hold more weight when the recruiter or the hiring manager does review your profile. So being able to highlight those specifically in the projects and in the details for each position is something I would prioritize.
Got it. So it sounds to me like it's storytelling becomes a critical part of this whole process. Like
Mm-hmm.
just in the portfolio, like how do you balance the complexity that you worked with, but also tell it in a fashion which is understandable uh,
Yes.
to someone who is not familiar with all of the context that you were while working there. So
Yep.
it does require some iterations and feedback. So
Yes.
yeah, highly suggest reviewing your portfolio with a designer or with like your fellow designers to kind of tighten it and figure out where are like the places that the storytelling can be improved. I personally use that a lot when I was looking for a job. So leverage the network and get feedback on your portfolio and your resumes. um, there are also like a couple questions from Jason and Jessica which are similar, which is, do you have comments or tips for someone that's transitioning into UX design? What kinds of skills do managers look for in an entry or junior level role?
Yeah, for those who are trying to transition into UX design from, a different industry or I know marketing, product, we've seen candidates internally within Smartsheet transition from those backgrounds into design successfully. And so I think it's the certifications, if you're taking the courses, but then being able to highlight, because there's a lot of transferable skills that you actually have within those that translate into problem solving, using data to drive decision making, collaborating cross functionally, working within a team environment. And so highlighting the skills and the experience that you have um, as it relates to the position you're applying to, a lot of those are transferable. So being able to speak to, in marketing, I might have worked on this project, which isn't UX, but here's how this actually relates and would translate well into UX. And so using the overall professional experience that you have and highlighting those, there is that path there. But I do think like the certifications, the courses, those pieces as you trying to make that transition, that's going to be a big positive and something that I'd prioritize there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I myself remember I was a software engineer before I
Yes.
became a UX designer. And so I had done like some sessions on how to improve like interface of the application I was working on. So I highlighted that in my resume. So I think it totally makes sense to
Mhm.
just kind of highlight the relevant work pieces for like even a different position that you have worked on. Cool. I think Suyesh also put in a very interesting question, which is, "Hi Sarah, what are your thoughts on why 2025 job market is brutal?" Yeah, I think lots of people are having trouble
Mhm.
getting like interviews with like 5 plus 6 plus years of experience. So what are your thoughts on the overall situation that's happening in market right now?
Yeah, the job market is pretty intense right now. I mean, there's a lot of companies that are laying off, that are going through cuts, which are, flooding the market with a lot of very strong qualified candidates trying to apply for a very limited amount of roles. And so it is tough. Um, I would recommend trying to get on, job descriptions early, applying early if you can, like refreshing, you can set up alerts with specific companies that you're interested in when they post new positions, so that you can kind of go through and try to submit your application as soon as those roles go up. I think this is where like networking, being involved in those communities, trying to expand and find those like referral employee opportunities, those will be kind of key in this market, because it is just so many great qualified folks for just the limited amount of roles at this point. So those connections will be even more important. And I think those community involvements will also be a big priority, a way for you to get your foot in the door with this market the way it is right now.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. And I remember like when I was um, in school, like we used to have lots of events
Mm-hmm.
around
Yes.
like recruitment, and yeah, I would always go and hand in a resume to a recruiter. So finding those events and finding those personal connections definitely helps, and I would always hear back like in 90% of the cases. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's definitely helpful to meet people
Yeah.
in.
Well, and we'll even have hiring managers come with us to some of these events as well. So it's a way to not only meet, some of the recruiters, but there's a potential chance for you to actually meet folks within the UX team, or hiring managers as well. So a chance for you to if you do get to those events, a really great way to meet some of those individuals.
Super cool. Um, I think Jay had an interesting question. As someone transitioning into UX design, is it okay to move around the experience on the resume? Like, does it have to be chronological, or can they move it around
You
based?
can move it around, as long as you're highlighting um, very clearly where the experience, like I wouldn't want to try to say, something I did 10 years ago, something I did yesterday, or recently. So just being very honest and transparent around when that experience was, and make it clear. As long as it's easy to read and kind of follow, I think you can have some flexibility there to try to highlight some of the skills as you're transitioning into a new industry or role. Just make sure you're being intentional about what that is and clear on the years of experience, and years you're in those roles.
Keeping it real and honest.
Yeah.
Cool. We are almost at time, but I just want to have a couple more questions before we close it off.
Yes,
So I
sorry.
might have missed your answer. I use a LinkedIn Premium Market's top job choice feature, and I can basically write a message via that feature to the hiring manager that is using that has posted that kind of a job posting. So does that help with the application process, or
Yes.
like what do you think?
Yep, absolutely. And we will have hiring managers, and quite a few of them that will go onto their LinkedIn and highlight the specific job that their team is hiring for. And so utilizing that, if you see the post, to reach out to that manager directly, or even connections that you have, absolutely.
No, it's actually a feature, Marcus top job choice. I can apply, and I can check that checkbox
Oh,
and
yes.
write,
Yeah.
I can
Yep.
basically drop a message without even sending a DM to the hiring manager.
Yep.
It's a
Yeah.
feature. Yeah.
Utilizing those tools in any way to kind of get through, absolutely would recommend.
Awesome. Perfect.
I have another question regards also kind of tools and different sources of job listings. So there is so many, right?
Yeah.
So many, and sometimes you see duplications. My understanding is that LinkedIn is the mother of everything. It has all the features, it has all the metrics from your end.
Yes.
Probably that's the best one to use. But why would I want? Do you have a secondary? Should we use or concentrate our efforts towards the top three, or should we just use them all?
Yeah, you can definitely use them all. I mean, when we post a position, we have, I think, like 300 job boards that our positions will go to. So we try to expand it in large companies as well. They're probably using more, but you're right. Like LinkedIn, it's most compatible with a lot of the ATS. So I would focus on LinkedIn. Indeed's another one that we see as well. That's pretty good. I know Monster. I mean, there's so many that are out there, but I would prioritize probably the top few, but you can go through even more. And I know some folks will say, like, sometimes there are duplications, or you're not sure if like this role is the same as a different role that you see at the same company on a different site. It doesn't hurt, at least for Smartsheet and most companies that I'm aware of, to apply through both of those. The ATS is smart enough to connect your profile and merge those together, or it can be done manually, but it doesn't hurt if you are like, okay, I'm not sure, apply again and go through that.
We just have time for maybe one last question, if there are any remaining ones. But if not, we can basically close the session for today. So any last question before we close off?
Hello. I had a question. Am I audible?
Well, of course.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask about referrals. So does getting referred through the internal referral portals really help? Because in bigger companies, I'm assuming so many people get referred. So, I mean, does it affect? Yeah.
It definitely doesn't hurt. And so if you have a connection, if you can find that, even for bigger companies, I do think they prioritize and they'll look through internal referrals. I know for mid-sized companies, we're probably not getting as many. And so we absolutely go through those. So I would recommend, if you do have that connection, to be able to utilize that.
Okay. Thank
you. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Perfect. So I guess we are a little over time. But I guess if there are more questions, like, feel free to connect with me on ADP list, and you can always like send me messages there with your questions. And I can definitely like connect with Sarah later and get some answers for those as well. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that thank you so much everyone for attending this session. I hope this was helpful, and thank you so much, Sarah, for taking time in answering everyone's questions, and really appreciate you taking time for this.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you, everyone. Fun morning. Appreciate your time.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Bye all.
weekend.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.